In the late 80s, the East Coast had the Bomb Squad, building walls of sound out of dense layers of samples. But on the other side of the country, two college radio DJs in Los Angeles were quietly piecing together their own sonic Frankenstein. They called themselves the Dust Brothers. Their cut-and-paste style would power the Beastie Boys' Paul's Boutique, an album built from hundreds of samples. It baffled fans at first, but today it's hailed as a true hip-hop classic. So how did two unknown DJs go from tiny college radio booth to producing Grammy winners and scoring Hollywood movies? To find out, we've got to rewind all the way back to the beginning. Our story begins on opposite coasts of the United States, where two teenagers were discovering hip-hop in very different ways. Mike Simpson, better known as Easy Mike, grew up in New York City. His musical background came from collecting records, studying the sounds, the arrangements, and the way they were recorded.
I grew up in New York City, and I grew up listening to like the Jackson 5, the Ohio Players, and Parliament Funkadelic.
Those records were his foundation. He was there during the famous summer of 1973 when hip-hop had first emerged, soaking in a culture that hadn't yet spread to the rest of the country. John King, also known as King Gizmo, had a very different path. Growing up on the West Coast, his early influences came from the records in his parents' and grandparents' collection.
I started by playing my parents' records and my grandparents' records. My grandparents were from the Deep South and Panama City, Florida, and listening to Johnny Cash and Chuck Berry.
Before long, he picked up an instrument of his own.
I picked up a trumpet at my grandma's house and played trumpet for a long time up until college, and so I was classically trained in that.
By the time he arrived at college, King's world was expanding again. He was introduced to a new scene, funk and early rap records that were just beginning to filter into Los Angeles.
I met some guys that hit me to the sort of funk dance scene, and then just started finding these rap records. There weren't that many back then in the early 80s, and I just loved that. So I sort of grew along with the rap scene as it reached out to the West Coast.
After leaving New York for California in 1978, Mike Simpson found himself in a place where hip-hop culture barely existed. To stay connected, he relied on cassettes mailed from friends back east. By 1983, he'd landed a spot on Pomona's college radio station, KSPC, hosting his own show. With rap records still scarce on the West Coast, he filled the gaps with funk and soul. John King also had a funk-based slot on the station. A mutual friend, KSPC's musical director, introduced the two, and they quickly hit it off.
I met Mike because I was doing a funk show on the radio station, the KSPC in Claremont.
Together they merged their shows into a 3-hour program called the Big Beat Showcase, giving hip-hop music a home on the Southern California airwaves.
Well, I feel like we were the first. Even the local station that started to play rap in LA, K-Day, I don't think was really playing rap yet, because there weren't that many rap records. Whenever one would come out, we would basically play like every song from the record, because we had a 3-hour show.
With hours of airtime to fill, they began creating their own material for the show. Wild mega mixes, originally built as a background for public service announcements, but soon evolving into something far more inventive.
We wanted to do these amazing mega mixes where we'd take an instrumental from one rap song or a funk song and combine it with an a cappella from another, or put two instrumentals over each other. That was really inspired by the New York scratch masters. And then also when I was a kid growing up, Mr. Jaws had influenced me.
Well, Mr. Jaws, how was it? And what did she say when you grabbed her?
In the 70s, it had taken all these pop records and made it into like a comedy record of mashup.
With little more than a piece of gear borrowed from a friend, they learned how to layer loops, overdub parts, and build dense production quality mixes.
We borrowed our friend's 4-track machine, and that way we didn't have to be like the ultimate DJ wizards. We could actually do multiple takes, laying stuff down and layering over each other, and make these production quality mixes that we would then play on a show.
These experiments, at first just background music for promos and filler between records, were becoming the blueprint for their sound.
We had been constructing music beds to use as background beds for public service announcements on our radio show out in Claremont. Originally, that was the end result of what we were doing with these tracks.
Before long, the Big Beat Showcase had become a destination for California's emerging rap scene, a place where up-and-coming MCs would swing through the booth. One of them was a young LA rapper called Tone Loc.
we played him some of our stuff that we've been doing for the radio, and he really liked it and wanted us to come meet the guys that were about to start Delicious Vinyl.
Tone Loc wasn't just impressed, he brought Simpson and King to Hollywood, where a pair of DJs turned entrepreneurs, Matt Dyke and Michael Ross, were starting a new label, Delicious Vinyl. When Dyke first heard what the Dust Brothers were doing, he couldn't believe it.
Matt heard the demo and we were listening to it at the studio and like, oh my God, these guys are on another level. They had like 8, 10 samples going on at the same time and all synced up. Back then, we didn't know how to do that really. We had the guys come down to the studio and they explained to us, like, we use a 4-track cassette, but we have a little box, a PPS-1 that lays empty on a track and it reads it back so you can sync it up. It allowed you to go back, sync up to the same BPM at the same point. And then we were like, oh my God, this is like a new invention.
They began collaborating more closely. The Dust Brothers brought their technology into the mix, and in return, Mario and Dyke gave them access to the studio.
They brought this technology to us and we incorporated it and started using it at our studio. And in return, we let them use the studio. At this point, we had upgraded the 8-track to the 16-track. They came and laid down like 15 tracks of loops.
From there, they began working with the Delicious Vinyl roster.
It was very similar to the Motown experience where the songwriters would write songs and then the artists would come in and each artist would take a crack at recording the song. Whoever ended up with the best version would get to release that song. We were sort of the Delicious Vinyl music factory.
In 1989, the label broke through in a big way. Tone Loc's debut album, Loc'd After Dark, hit #1 on the Billboard 200, powered by 2 massive singles, Wild Thing and Key Cold Medina. The Dust Brothers hadn't produced those tracks, but they had contributed cuts like Next Episode and Cutting Rhythms.
Rama ding dong, bigger than King Kong. I'm on the mic and still got it going on.
Helping to shape the album's sound.
Wild Thing just came out, and almost overnight, it was huge. We were still broke, and we were just like these poor college graduate guys. We have the #1 record in the country, and we don't even have $3 to buy a billboard.
They also teamed up with another Delicious Vinyl artist, Young MC, producing the sample-heavy Know How.
Pulling out rhymes like books off the shelf. Born in England, raised in Holland, thought I go for myself. This is stone cold rhyming, no frills, no fluffs, and it's no...
But not every beat they made worked for the Delicious Vinyl roster. Some of the tracks Simpson and King made were simply too chaotic for an MC to rap over.
There were several tracks that had too much going on and just didn't work for any of the Delicious Vinyl artists. Whenever we came across one of those tracks, we would just set it aside and say, okay, this one will be earmarked for the Dust Brothers album.
It was around that same time that word was spreading that the Beastie Boys had split from Def Jam.
Matt had heard the Beastie Boys had just got off their label and he was like, we gotta do their record. So we get our little contact, this little skater kid, Max Perlick, who was an actor and knew ad rock, and we slipped him the tape. They wanted to go to the next level, and this was the next level to them.
In New York, Max Perlick handed the cassette to the Beastie Boys. When they pressed play, they heard something unlike anything else in hip-hop at the time, and the seed for their next album had just been planted. The earliest work on Paul's Boutique didn't start in a glossy studio. It began in a cramped Santa Monica Boulevard apartment belonging to Matt Dyke, a space stacked with vinyl, samplers, and a makeshift vocal booth in the closet.
They had made instrumentals to play in clubs, and then I think we said, can we rhyme over it? I remember Mike saying, well, maybe we could strip it down to the beats and then you could rhyme over it. We said, no, we want to rhyme over the music.
Congratulations. With the purchase of this record, you have embarked upon an endeavor that shall prove to be a rewarding and enjoyable experience.
A lot of the stuff, we recorded rough vocals at Matt's house, and then we went over to a studio and re-recorded vocals.
With Capitol now back in the project, the team suddenly had a budget to leave the apartment behind and work out of one of LA's most expensive studios.
They didn't spare no expenses, and we went to the top studio, like a record plant, and spent $3,000 a day. Since there was no instruments, we had like a huge room and where they record drums, and we rented a ping pong table, a pool table, air hockey, pinball, and just fill it up with junk that wasn't music. It was like 2 teams. We were there in the daytime laying down the tracks, and then they would show up at night. Okay, we got some lyrics, work on a quick arrangement, and laid it down.
What really gave the record its character was the mountain of vinyl Simpson had been digging for since he was a teenager.
At the time, I had maybe about 500 records in my collection. That was where all the sounds came from, was from my experience collecting records for all those years.
The main tool for slicing those records was an EMU Emax HD, a 12-bit sampler with only 8 voices and a 22 kilohertz limit. By today's standards, it was simple, but those limitations forced Simpson and King to get creative, layering fragments of funk, soul, and rock into dense new ideas. Shake Your Rump is one of the standout tracks on Paul's Boutique, and it's a perfect example of the Dust Brothers' approach. The song is built from at least 15 samples that we know of, layered together into one seamless track. And I want to quickly show you just how crazy it is. It opens with a drum fill from Alfonso Mouzon's Funky Snakefoot, quickly followed by a 2-bar break from Harvey Scales' Dancing Room Only. The first melodic hook comes from Ronnie Law's Tell Me Something Good, a 1-bar guitar loop that loops perfectly with the drums. Those drums shift again, replaced by a break pulled from Super Mellow, a jazz funk track featuring Louis Bellson, Shelly Manne, Willie Bobo and Paul Humphrey. Just before the bass drops, you hear a vocal snippet from Funky 4+1's That's the Joint. It's the joint! The bass line itself is chopped and pitched from Rose Royce's 6 O'Clock DJ. Later, when that line drops out, another Rose Royce track steps in, Yo-Yo, providing both a slap bass groove and extra vocal layers. The Dust Brothers also weave in elements from Africa Bambaataa and James Brown's Unity, plus Bambaata's funky sensation with what sounds like Brazilian instrument, a cueca. And finally, a guitar lick from Rose Royce's Born to Love You, the third track from the legendary Car Wash soundtrack. Altogether, it's a masterclass in cut and paste production. Dozens of fragments transformed into one of hip-hop's most inventive tracks. For sequencing, they leaned on an early IBM program called Texture, just a grid of numbers and letters on a green screen, synced to tape with a PPS-1 box. Every track on the multi-track was filled with loops, and the structure of each song came from muting and unmuting channels in real time.
We didn't know how to arrange it, so what we did, we had continuous loops, and then we just did everything with the mutes, turning stuff on and off. That was the old school way of arranging it.
And scratching played just as big a role on the album. Most of what you hear on the record came from Mike, who with King even built their own custom switch box to cut sounds in and out faster than a mixer would allow them to do it.
Mike does basically all the scratching on this.
Yeah, and he was nice with the cutting.
He was the first person, remember, he had like a Terminator box.
Him and Giz had invented this thing so that when you push down the button, it's on.
It was a homemade version of what would later become the standard transformer switch on a DJ mixer. Another example of the Dust Brothers solving problems by inventing their own tools. The results were some of the most adventurous sample collages hip-hop had ever heard, with the album closing with B-Boy Boo Your Best.
New York, New York, it's a hell of a town. You know the Bronx is up and I'll put it down.
A sprawling 12-minute suite stitched together from fragments that never quite worked as standalone songs. The official count had Paul's Boutique using over 100 samples, and an unofficial estimate puts the number close to 200-300. Clearing them cost around $250,000, pushing the total budget for the album to nearly $1 million. When it hit shelves in July 1989, Paul's Boutique baffled a lot of listeners, expecting another license to ill.
People weren't ready for it, radio wasn't ready for it. It was under the radar, and then years later became a legendary album.
However, by the end of 1989, the album had gone gold. A decade later, it was double platinum. Today, it's hailed as one of hip-hop's most innovative records, often called the Sgt. Pepper of rap. Right, a quick little break before we dive into the final chapter. If you're into sampling like the Dust Brothers, chopping, layering, flipping sounds into something brand new, I actually make my own sample packs designed for producers making hip-hop. Perfect to dig into if you want that same kind of collage approach. Right now, everything's buy one, get one free on our website with the code second course at checkout. And if you just want to try a few things first, there are free packs you can grab too. We've also got our own Discord, so if you're a producer looking to share your music, collaborate, or want to enter some of our beat battles and win some great prizes, we'd love to see some of you in there. And the link for all of those is in the description. Anyway, back to the important stuff. Working on Paul's Boutique was a turning point for the Dust Brothers. Suddenly, the duo were in demand. After their success with Delicious Vinyl, they continued working alongside Matt Dyke, and soon they caught the attention of a new wave of artists. Most famously, Beck, coming off the back of his breakout debut album.
Our partner in our record label, Mitchell Frank, had been telling us about Beck before Loser came out, and he was like, this is a guy you gotta meet.
The Dust Brothers went on to produce his album Odd Late in 1996. Another collage-driven masterpiece that blended live instruments with samples, won 2 Grammys and pushed cut-and-paste production into the alternative rock world. By then, the technology had evolved, giving them new ways to work.
But what was different is that computers had advanced over the 10 years to incredible amounts of power compared to what it had before. When we made Odelay, what we had to do is we had to record what Beck would play and then turn that into a sample and then create MIDI notes to play the sample, and this was all in a program called Opcode Studio Vision.
They also branched out into film, scoring David Fincher's cult classic Fight Club in 1999. It was darker, more electronic, but the same Dust Brothers DNA ran through it. And while Paul's Boutique didn't light up the charts when it first came out, its influence only grew. Over time, it's been hailed as a landmark, a record that proved sampling could be high art, and a blueprint for everyone from DJ Shadow to the Avalanches to producers like Danger Mouse. For the Dust Brothers, it all started with a college radio show and a box of records. But in helping the Beastie Boys reinvent themselves, they also reshaped the possibilities of hip-hop production, leaving behind a legacy that still echoes through music today.